Look at this beautiful sign of spring. All that beautiful fresh foliage, you cannot beat it. How vibrant and green it is. That's why I love spring. But let me tell you a story. Some time ago, there was a story posted about plants, about two arborvitaes, I believe, and people didn't want them in their garden, so they were ready to give them for adoption. And what they did, they digged it all out, and arborvitae was probably my height, 6 feet, and they digged all the plant out, shook all the roots well from the soil, so basically you can see all the root system, and they put it on the side, near the sidewalk, on the sun, mind you, and they wrote down, all ready to be nicely adopted and nurtured back to life. And those plants, those trees are laying there like that, who knows for how many hours or maybe days. And I looked at it and I said, this is not living, this is dead. Those plants are dead, those trees are dead. There's no way to bring them back. And why is that? The beginner gardeners might ask. So let's replant this bully in my garden. It's called Six Hills Giant Nepeta, and I'm going to replant it because it's getting to be too out of space here, and it's really, I must say, nasty to its neighbors. So let's talk major points for the beginner gardener, how to replant your plants to have a successful garden. Well, the general rule is that spring blooming plants are best transplanted in the fall, and summer blooming plants or fall blooming plants are best transplanted in spring. But you know what? My 5 cents is it's only because the blooming time would be diminished if you are transplanting spring blooming plants in spring. And to my opinion, spring in our area, where we have fairly strong winters coming quickly in the fall, I think spring is the best opportunity to do all sorts of moving of different plants in the garden. Usually the soil is already dried up at this time, it's the middle of April, it's not really compacted, not really wet. And for the beginner gardeners, what happens to soil just after coming out of winter? Usually it's very saturated with moisture, and if we walk on it or we try to dig, different plants and plant them back into their new locations when the soil is still not somewhat dryish, we can really compact that soil for many years sometimes. So try not to walk on your flower beds, your vegetable beds. Generally, we don't want to do it through the year to begin with, but especially in that time after spring is finished, but soil is still very wet. But now, soil is fairly dryish, it is ready to be replanted. And the first rule of replantings for the beginner gardener would be, it's a good idea to prepare your hole where you are going to replant the plant ahead of time. Why is it? Well, you don't want to leave this plant out into the open air, you don't want to expose the roots to the dry sun and air, and the plant is waiting till you're digging the next hole to put it in. So this guy, Six Hills Giant Nepeta, is going into the front of my garden. It is huge. This thing, I'm going to divide it in half, and there is a space where it can just become big and mighty and nothing will stop it, because here we have these boxwoods, and I can see that these guys suffered because Six Hills Nepeta was just spilling over here. So this space is small. Keep that in mind if you want to introduce Six Hills Nepeta into your garden. It's a big plant. It needs a lot of space. So this is going to be replanted today. The second point to consider would be your plants should be well hydrated, which is not really an issue in spring when we have a lot of rains, and it's not really an issue when you have something hardy like this perennial. Nepeta is a survivor, tenacious thing. But if you have somewhat gentle plant, make sure that the day before you water it well and the root system of the plant is well hydrated. But coming back to that funny story I told you at the beginning of this video. So a lot of people don't realize that plants do have two different types of roots, and there are different types of root systems to begin with, but we are not going to talk about that. We are talking about these main roots and those little tiny hairy secondary roots. And the main function of main roots is to be the pipeline to move nutrients and water up and down the plant, and to anchor the plant well into the soil. So the growth of them is usually downwards, going down, anchoring the plant and moving the nutrients. But there are these little hairy roots, which you can see when you dig your plant up, and their main thing is to search for water and nutrients. So they are going outway, they search for where food is, and they start to become, more dense in areas where there is food in the soil. Also, another function of main roots is to store nutrients for winter. Then in spring we have all this beautiful, lush, beautiful growth, right? But our plants didn't spend time in winter collecting sun rays, and doing photosynthesis. So this all is because of energy was stored in the roots, and plant has that energy to push forward beautiful new growth for us. So the beginner gardener can make a very bad mistake by exposing the roots, especially those hairy roots, to the air. And once those hairy roots dry, they're dead. So basically, if you want to transplant something fairly big like this Nepeta, make sure you have a bucket near you and you have a can of water with you. That's what I like to do. So my hole in the front of the garden is already prepared. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to dig it up, and what I like to do. I like to make big, nice cuts all around. This is going to be tough here. I like to just go around the plant. There is something here. With deep, nice, sharp cuts. All right, this is plant number 1. Looks like it's being by itself, almost being divided. And I really don't like to use forks in taking plants out of the soil, because I want them to have all that soil still hanging around the roots. So I'd rather do shovel and use fork if I need to divide the plants. Okay, that's it, I think. And just to show you how important the root system organ is for general survival of the plants. Look at this little rose coming up. This rose didn't exist in my garden for 2 years. And this is the root system from Dr. Huey. I suspect there was some rose planted here on Dr. Huey rootstock, and that at some point it disappeared and the rootstock took over. So for several years, Dr. Huey, this reddish pinkish rose, was growing in my garden. It's very thickish. So I decided to take it out and throw it away, which I did 2 years ago. And look at this. The whole last year, I didn't see a sign of Dr. Huey. And that root system was in the ground storing nutrients, and now it decided to show up. So roots can go dormant for many months, even for a year, and then next spring they can just start growing pushing the new growth. So if you see the plant is dead in the fall, don't be so quick to throw it away. Wait till spring, and then your plant might be growing and surprising you with the new lush leaves. But this Dr. Huey doesn't have a future in my garden. I will be taking it out. All right, a little bit of watering, and my Nepeta is going to be moved to the front of my garden. Let's go, baby. Talking about the tough spot to plant my Nepeta. This is a strip, a corner of my property between the sidewalk and the road, under the maple tree. Oh my gosh. But you know what? Nepeta is one of those plants which is very drought tolerant once established. And you know what? A lot of gardeners do make that mistake. They are thinking once the plant is drought tolerant, you can plant it in and forget about it. No, you have to pay attention to the plant freshly planted, at least for several weeks, to make sure you plant it we water it every second day, to make sure that those little hairy roots have the chance to develop. But don't forget to water your hole first. And Nepeta loves well-draining soils. Nepeta doesn't care about the drought, lack of water, but it cannot grow well in waterlogged conditions. Okay. Very important not to have any air pockets around the roots of freshly planted Nepeta. So I make sure I tuck it in well there. And of course, cloudy conditions would be the best to plant. Right now sun is shining, but you know what? Nepeta is such a tough plant that it's going to take it no problem, that sun. But if you have some gentle plants, make sure that you wait for the cloudy conditions, or plant it late in the afternoon when sun is not so strong. I love this good old-fashioned garden work, you know, physical work. It's all good. I don't need this grass, so I'm going to shake all the soil, and this goes into the compost pile. And I'm just going to level it a little bit here. Eventually this area will receive a good layer of topsoil, but otherwise this is how it's going to be for now. All right, isn't it a nice place for a rose? What do you say? I think so. I have this Boscobel rose, which is doing nothing in the front of my garden, and I'm going to replant it probably right here or here. But here I have Black Eye Susan growing already, so maybe I will do it here. A nice prepping space for my Boscobel. And it's one of high maintenance David Austin roses. I think it's very susceptible to black spot, which is a prevalent rose disease in my area. So let's see, let's give it full sun here, and let's see how she's going to be doing here in the back of my garden in kind of sheltered location. All right, my dear gardeners, enjoy this busy time of the year, spring, when everything is growing. Oh, it's fun. Tough, a lot of work, you know, but it's good work. Happy gardening. I will see you next time.